If you enjoy this content, please take a moment to rate and review it. Your feedback will greatly impact our ability to reach more people. Thank you.
Greetings from sunny Mexico City.
Yes, nice. It is on and off here in Nashville. I thought it was going to rain, but it's come out a little bit. I'm homeless, though. Our normal studio and office lost power, so I'm down the street at a new location.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least you can do that. I mean, that's the nice thing about Industrious is, that's right. Multiple locations you can always hop over to. Shout out to Industrious. I recorded, was it last week I recorded in New York at the Industrious?
Yeah, that was last week. You were in Industrious in New York.
Yeah, so, it's so great to be with an organization like that where we can like pop all over the country and like always have a nice spot to meet people and record in. Yet another busy week. Looking at the Wall Street Journal, like everything is all bright red. So do you know why? You know what's going on there?
I don't know why. My guess is that we haven't made peace with Iran like Trump was promising last night, but I haven't looked at it. But yeah, the entire thing's red. Yeah,
it looks pretty ugly. And then today, I mean, we're going to talk about it, but Google kind of doubling down in the health space. There's some OpenAI stuff doubling down in the health space. I mean, the healthcare industry is generally doing pretty well right now. So I just think it's so interesting that everything goes red, but healthcare is doing pretty well.
Right.
You know, the funky thing about this industry,
Right.
Funky thing about this industry. All right, man. Look, if nothing else, then we can jump in. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's dig in.
All right, let's dig in. Starting with the economy, as always, we're going to talk about jobs today. And the March labor market was stable, if sluggish, says the Wall Street Journal. The rate of jobs slipped from 4.1 to 4.2. That's open jobs in February. So this is a bit of a look back. I think we're still trying to clean up the issues around data and reporting and confidence in that data. But the Labor Department is reporting that basically the jobs that were open were about what we would have expected. So I think there seems to be on X like a lot of victory dances that all the AI positive folks are taking around the demise of jobs from AI being greatly exaggerated, if not patently false. And I think this data is probably what is underlying their narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get the new report tomorrow. So this story is sort of in preparation for that. And it's good to have perspective that in January, open jobs, was 4.4, then 4.2 in February, 4.1 in March. So slipping a little bit, but not really falling off a cliff at all.
Right. The job market starts to show glimmers of good news. This is from ADP. Again, quality of data, trustworthiness. It used to be we would not think that highly of ADP because it was starting to really stray from the BLS reports. But BLS is so suspect at this point that maybe we're back to trusting ADP. But the numbers from ADP on Wednesday showed that the private sector added 109,000 jobs in April, which would be the best in 15 months. And that's paired with that news we just gave from the Labor Department. So generally speaking, I think the folks that want to talk about how positive the economy is, they've got some talking points at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. It's holding on. I mean, we have another story, a few minutes about some coming layoffs and things. So I think I still am taking a wait and see approach, but right now the job market's holding on.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. Let's pivot to private credit really quick. HSBC, which has been in the news on a couple of different storylines for not good reasons over the last 7 days. This story is about a $400 million hit that they are proactively taking from private credit alleged fraud. We've been talking for the last 3 or 4 weeks now about the issues that are developing and bubbling up in the private credit market. It started with the canary in the coal mine, which was Blue Owl. And then as investigative journalists started to dig in, they realized that while the big banks weren't directly in private credit, they were financing the folks who were doing private credit. And so this is actually a much more systemic issue than maybe we had thought, given the pretty high risk that private credit poses. And here we have HSBC, one of the biggest international banks, taking a $400 million hit. And so the signs continue to point that there's trouble in those hills.
Yeah, that's right. And I just want to keep monitoring it. So far, it has been, I mean, 400 million is a lot of money, but for HSBC, they can manage through that. But I want to just sort of keep an eye on this market because it could change pretty quickly if it does become a problem.
Yep, agreed. All right, so now let's get to the whole AI and the workforce story. So this is a story from the Wall Street Journal. AI is forcing CEOs to make a stark choice: lay off workers or make them do more. I know that we are feeling that internally at Jumpstart and across our portfolio. This is sort of an obvious story, but this is also a general story where they touch on many different companies and the experience that they're having. I think the big story for this week was Coinbase. Brian Armstrong came out on X and shared that they were cutting 14% of their workforce. They're well capitalized. They've got a lot of momentum. We're going to talk later on in the show about a big deal that they just announced, but they're sort of proactively making these cuts, presumably because they know that AI can enable them to do a lot without this group of knowledge workers who they've decided to let go of. But also, there is this sense that organizations feel that AI is such a step change in capabilities for organizations that it's time to sort of rethink how organizations should function at all. I know that that's a lot of the conversation that I'm having with entrepreneurs and some of my friends in peer mentorship group chats. Really maybe spurred by that Jack Dorsey blog post from Block, and Block laid off 40% of their workforce. So even though the number may not be as high as some of the other numbers, I mean, the percentage is massive. And he's clearly looking at, a wholesale change in the way that organizations function. And that seems to be the theme of this article. Is that your read on it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, to me, it is pretty clear that the way that businesses conduct themselves is going to change. There's going to be fewer levels of middle managers because that sort of communication where you have a meeting and then you have another meeting to explain what happened. Then you have several meetings to monitor the status of a project. AI can collapse a lot of those communication layers and make the communication more efficient and let people work on their own without getting lost. And so I think it's going to change the way that we think about how to design an organization. Certainly in startups, you and I have seen that. Bigger companies have more change management, more cultural things to work through. But I think it's going to, what we're seeing is, at least from this chart, there have been significant layoffs. It hasn't showed up in the jobs report yet, but I think we need to keep watching it because it could accelerate this summer.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, it's not like the layoffs just started with the rise of generative AI. Which is really like a 12-month running phenomenon. I mean, I feel like everything was a toy before Claude Code, and Claude Code didn't really land until Q4 of last year. And so we had layoffs that were coming far before that. Vic, we were talking on Slack about there's going to be a lot of companies that follow Coinbase's lead, and it's like, well, yeah, but Coinbase followed Block, and Block followed Amazon, and Amazon followed Meta, and Meta followed X, right? You know what I mean? And in the case of X, which I feel like was the real start to this trend, it was something deeper than simply AI. I think it was maybe rebounding from the incredible amount of hiring that came after the pandemic. So many companies just scaled up their hires. I think as Elon got inside of X and realized that there was going to be a lot of work that was going to need to happen to make the company, I don't even want to say like viable. I want to say make the product move forward, right? Because for anyone who was using Twitter for years, forget your political affiliation with it, the product was completely stalled. Like nothing new came to the product. And if you look at X, since he's come on board, whatever you think of the politics, the product is like, it's like 3 or 4 times the quality of the product before, and just in terms of new features that have been rolled out, new capabilities that are there, at least shots on goal to try to make the product better. And he pulled that off with a much, much smaller team, right? And so I think people are starting to realize it's about the quality of the people you have in your organization. It's about how agency oriented they are. It's maybe, to your point about middle management, less about management and more about high quality individual contributors. And now AI is just sort of putting jet fuel on top of all of that.
That's right. And as you get different levels of management, I think you lose a lot of the signal as the signal propagates down through different layers. And so it is about saving money, but I think for a lot of these companies, it's more about becoming a more efficient organization, be able to do more product releases, communicate more clearly through fewer levels of abstraction. And that also ends up, you don't need as many people.
Yes. And presumably that means there'll be more smaller companies being started with all these talented people that are now in the market to tackle problems that these very, very large companies are not well equipped to tackle, right? And hopefully that's
I think that will
upside.
definitely happen. The question is, does that happen quickly enough to absorb all the new entries into the job market?
Right.
And so far it has, but we'll see.
Yeah. PayPal is going to cut 20% of their staff amid a turnaround push. This has just been I feel like this has been a decade or more in the making. David Marcus, who left PayPal to go to Meta and work on Libra, and now is working solely on some Bitcoin venture that I can't quite remember. He was the last great leader that PayPal had. He really was driving the product in a really positive way and doing some really great work. But since he's been gone, and that's been a long time since he's been gone, this company has not been a very good company. And it's like PayPal and eBay and Venmo, kind of that whole group of companies has just struggled with leadership. But they're incredible assets, they're incredible brands. It's like they have all this penetration. So many people still use these products, to this day. I'm hoping that something great is in the work for these products and they don't kind of go the way of Yahoo. But yeah, 20% cut to the staff as they seek to turn around is not surprising.
Yeah, I think that's right. Did you see that? I didn't put it in here, but GameStop is trying to buy eBay. You see that?
I did see that.
So maybe these kind of assets can be repurposed, but I'm not sure GameStop is the way to do it, but we'll see.
GameStop has just become hilarious. And then, I think this might be the last story here. The IBM CEO, Arvind Krishna, says that AI triggers a need for new operating models. And so when IBM, kind of the oldest dog in the technology game, is saying it's time for a new operating model, I think maybe it's time for a new operating model.
Yeah. He gave a couple examples, but one of the examples was Elevance. And they are working with IBM. It's down maybe the last part. It starts with the hard part.
There it is.
Yeah. And so they're working with IBM and OpenAI to create a tool, they call it Spark, to sort of help subscribers understand their benefits. We've covered this in other payers too. It's not unique to Elevance, but interesting that, IBM was talking broadly, but then they used a healthcare example.
Yeah, I think this is going to happen more and more, right? Healthcare doing well, the rest of the industry is challenged. AI needs a positive narrative to attach itself to, and making healthcare better is probably as good a narrative as AI is going to find right now. Not surprising at all. Also, Elevance being a large payvider, but not with kind of the set of assets that either United or CVS Aetna has. Them partnering with OpenAI and IBM also kind of makes sense. All right, time for the VC rundown. Starting off with a startup enabling aging at home that raises $6 million and has a couple of new MA and Medicaid partnerships. The company is called Rosarium Health, and their seed round was led by Kalos Ventures with support from Resilience VC. I think the name most notable here is Rock Health is on the cap table. Symphonic Capital, American Family Insurance, Black Tech Nations, and the Council. So tell me a little bit about this company.
Yeah, so this is Medicare and Medicaid in-home assessments and then kind of home modifications, like you might take up the rugs and put a bar in the bathroom, typical kind of things to help a member or a patient age in place, age at home more effectively. There's a lot of companies out there that do this. We have invested in several. But it's a big market and is not really a dominant player. So interesting to see them. working on that.
Yeah, I'm curious from your experience with them in the portfolio, how much of the opportunity is MA versus Medicaid? The Medicaid piece makes a lot of sense to me, and I've been through this in the self-pay model with my parents. We've definitely had to do the in-home assessments and the modifications, especially to the bedroom and the bathroom. MA surprises me a little bit here. Obviously, it's MA, so it's to the discretion of the payer, but I didn't really think about MA being a big player in this space.
Yeah, I think you hit it exactly right. I think it depends on the plan and their competitive landscape in the market where they are trying to get new subscribers. As we have covered, people are, the markets are getting thinner in MA. So these extra perks that used to be very common to be added in, maybe it could be less over time. But that's how Rosarium works. They sort of partner with either Medicaid plan or MA plan to do these services for their members.
Got it. Enzo Health raises $20 million to expand an AI home health platform. The company will use the funds to expand its platform into skilled nursing and hospice care as providers brace for the silver tsunami of aging Americans. The Series A was led by N47 with participation from Gradient, Tandem Ventures, and Rigby Watts. What can you tell me about them?
I don't know. This one's a little bit more confused. It's the same space, kind of working with home health and bringing AI to it. I'm not sure that AI is all that helpful in home health. It's really it's a difficult staffing challenge. Maybe they can sort of more effectively utilize their staff, but they weren't only talking about that. They were talking about kind of analyzing documentation and reimbursement and kind of getting the referrals more streamlined. All of that is useful, but the real key is reducing turnover and keeping your home health staff engaged. And I'm not sure how AI is going to work with that, but maybe I don't know much about the company. I don't know.
Well, it also could be one of those things where you have to say AI to get the valuation where you want it and to get the dollars in the door. But the reality is there's a lot more just basic workflow plumbing and a lot less AI that actually drives the efficiency here.
Yeah.
I don't know much, but I know in our pipeline when we're looking at deals, there's a lot of stuff that says AI, and you look into it and it's like,
right.
Okay,
yeah, they have AI somewhere, but not
right.
Sure.
Right. XCaliber Health scores $6.5 million for a workflow platform. This company is offering pre-built AI agents to streamline healthcare workflows, which can be customized to support additional capabilities. So this is, I think, more directly going to be very focused on AI. There seems to be this race for the agentic operating system, and there's a bunch of different companies going after that. But I think that it's going to be a very fragmented space. Why? Because I think very similar to the 8090 company that Chamath Palihapitiya is launching, to actually get these things to work, there's a pretty heavy services component to it, right? I mean, like, it's not just you hand off these AI agents and everything is milk and honey. I mean, I think there's a lot of rolling up sleeves, actually integrating it with workflows, actually working on all the edge cases where things fail, tying things together, getting data sets to behave correctly, cleaning up data sets. So I think there's just a lot of consulting to this, and the slowness of the consulting aspect of it enables more and more players to clean up in business where you're sort of struggling to get through one deal at a time.
Yeah, I think I agree completely with you. I mean, there's a lot of promise in this, and healthcare workflows are very complex and kind of different, even within a system, facility to facility. The nurses and doctors and med techs, they might do their workflow slightly differently. So I'm super bullish about how AI can be used to empower and help our workforce in healthcare, but it needs to be done sort of intentionally working through the workflows and even the culture so that you end up kind of enabling the culture as opposed to top down, just forcing an agent into the fray. I don't think that will work.
Yeah. Having said that, 6.5 is a nice size seed, and it is a seed round, and let's see what XCaliber does. Village, a specialty pediatrics healthcare platform, raised $9.5 million. The funding was led by Upfront Ventures, so we know the folks at Upfront. Participation from Blink Capital, GTM Fund, and Perceptive Ventures. So what is a specialty pediatrics AI platform, Vic?
Well, so the idea is that instead of the parent having to navigate specialists for their child and figure out where to go, that this platform would know kind of who the specialists are, who is in network for you, and sort of become that navigation quarterback advisor for the parents so that they can make better decisions. It's a huge problem. It could be really good figuring out how to get integrated and get the right answers to people. So you have occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, all these different services that a child might need, and it's difficult to navigate right now.
I think
part of the issue, I think, is there's not enough providers. I mean, we invested in a telehealth, pediatric, occupational therapy, and speech therapist platform to try to increase the number of patients that one physical therapist can see, because the real problem, I think, is there's a shortage of providers in this space. I mean, at the same time, I think navigation is probably really useful. We also need to create more providers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just talking to a good friend who is a clinician. I'll just say that. And I was asking her about how things were progressing. She's not, her youngest child is not dealing with a behavioral health or mental health issue. It's a physical health issue. She was like, she's well into the 5 figures that they've spent trying to figure out the problem. They have not yet been able to figure out the problem. The 5 figures doesn't tell the whole story, right? It's the amount of time and energy and heartbreak and grief and fear that accompanies that. And this is just one family, right? And again, the woman who I'm talking about is a clinician, right? She knows the healthcare system pretty well. And she is, I'm asking her, hey, how's it been going? And she's like, let me know if you know anybody who knows XYZ, right? So I think the navigation for parents is a huge, huge opportunity. And that's probably what, these VCs see in funding Village for this round.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's probably both ends. I mean, we need new providers and we have to be able to navigate better.
Yeah. Oh, I sorry. I didn't mean to take away from your point about the lack of talent. Cause I think you're exactly right. I think I think the navigation is a big issue. And I think also, availability of clinicians is a big issue as well. Let's move to policy. So RFK Jr. wants to wean some Americans off antidepressants. HHS will encourage doctors to consider lifestyle changes, not drugs, to treat depression. I thought this was interesting because I was just talking to a founder, very, very early founder, pre-seed founder, earlier today. They've got a novel therapy that they want to bring to market that is, I think, rhymes with what RFK Jr. is trying to do here perfectly. And it's exactly what I told him. I said, listen, you're very early. What you're trying to do has not been the traditional model for this, right? I mean, traditionally, it's been sort of therapy plus, and when I say therapy, I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy. And then, prescription drugs has been how we've been navigating these types of behavioral health issues for a very, very long time. I think your mode of therapy has never had as much in the way of tailwinds as it does right now, just because this administration is really trying to drive more and more digital health and more non-pharmaceutical therapies to address behavioral health issues. So, the tailwinds are, I think there's a market hunger for it that hasn't been there before. The headwinds are, this is not what we've been doing. Right, we've been prescribing and we've been doing CBT, and so this is going to be a very big undertaking because it's a fundamental cultural shift in the way that Americans have been addressing behavioral health matters.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's going to be several years, maybe a decade, to turn this way we've been practicing to encourage alternatives. And I also think it's great that the administration is trying to push this. I mean, there's no question in my mind that doctors should consider all kinds of treatments in addition to medication. I think it does not make sense to be on an SSRI for your entire life. That's not a good recipe. Some people might need it, but that wouldn't be the goal at the beginning of prescribing that. It should be ideally a temporary thing, and then you add in therapy sessions, but also maybe music. I was talking with a guy at dinner last night who's doing a music therapy thing. There's lots of therapies that can have benefit, just they don't help everyone. So you have to pick and choose and try different things. And that's what our doctors should be doing. But changing their behavior is going to take a while.
Yeah, I think what you just said is the main point, right? I mean, so this is RFK Jr. saying, that HHS is going to encourage doctors, right? And when you talk about HHS, it's the parent over CMS and over FDA. But when you use the letters HHS, you're really talking about encouraging, right? You're not really driving or forcing policy or forcing a change in what the standard of care is. And so maybe this is the introduction to that coming, but I think it will be. It's a ways off. Your 10-year timeline feels reasonable to me before there's any like really meaningful change in the way that the standard of care is delivered today.
The good thing is that with HHS coming out and saying things like this, if a patient comes into the doctor and wants to entertain other things, there's now this like cover and acceptance that I think they'll get a much better receptance than previously.
That's a great point. And I agree. Okay. The SEC is proposing to eliminate quarterly reporting requirements for public companies. So we just shifted from the healthcare policy to securities policy, but this is just huge, right? I mean, and it's funny because everybody in the private markets talks about how the quarterly reporting schedule is the death of innovation in the public markets, right? Like only big tech companies are allowed to innovate because of quarterly earnings. It's like the other companies are purely free cash flow, assessed in terms of their EV, whereas tech companies, they're assessed by Wall Street assesses them by different metrics and gives them more leeway. I think really proven out by Amazon's very, very long time of being unprofitable and now being this dominant player on the market. But the removal of quarterly reporting could change the way that, big healthcare can innovate, right? I mean, we're going to go through a series of, things on the Pharma side and the payer side here in a little bit, talking about the quarterly reports, right? And I mean, there will be some impressive reports in there, but they're not necessarily going to be as a result of big innovation. It's going to be financial engineering, right? To kind of get the numbers in a place where Wall Street goes, okay, like you're back on track now. And that's really the only kind of innovation that's allowed with quarterly reporting in public markets. If you're not a big tech company, is financial engineering. So what do you think about this? I mean, obviously it impacts how everyone will mark to market. It impacts so much, but like, what are your thoughts about actually eliminating quarterly reporting?
It's like a lot of things with the Trump administration. I think it's really healthy for all the reasons you said. The quarterly need to show how the business is performing prevents you from doing any real significant investment or change or try to move your company in, because it takes longer than 3 months to make that kind of transition. A lot of the private equity go private sales pitch is get off the public markets so that we can then make some changes. We'll sell some assets. We'll make some, investment in new products. It's going to take 2 years, but it will be at the end of the 2 years, you'll be much stronger. You'll have a better competitive moat, and then we'll go back to the public markets. That's been a game plan in private equity for a long time for exactly this purpose. And so I think it makes sense to take that focus off, that people should not be trading on a quarterly earnings report in my mind, unless you're like a day trader and really do it full time. It doesn't make sense to have that short of a time horizon. And so it doesn't matter to me what HCA's quarterly numbers are. I'd rather them focus on being really good in the next 5 years. And it's going to be chaos in this transition. And so that's what I meant by it's how I feel about a lot of the Trump stuff. I'm in favor of it, and it's going to be a lot of change and pretty confusing for a while.
Yeah. I think that's well said. The Trump administration is certainly an administration that is an agent of change at a rate that is
right.
that is chaotic. You know,
I think it's unprecedented. Certainly, we haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's the rate of change, right? That's just so much. It's so much. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same boat with you, right? Where I think it's hard to come up with a good argument on like first principles for why quarterly reporting is so important. Like we have so much data on these companies right now, you know, and AI is only going to enable us to have more data on these companies. So it's not clear to me why that is that important. And at the same time, it will break so many things that have been based on this quarterly cadence being dependable, like especially because this is, it's an opt-out kind of thing, right? So every company doesn't have to opt out of it. So if some of them start going to biannual and the rest stick with quarterly, like that's even more dislocating.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Is that a sign that the ones that have gone to semi-annual are stronger or weaker? And it's probably both. I mean, it depends on why they decide to do it. I think it'll be interesting to watch, and probably the long run is healthy, but it's going to be very confusing for a couple of years, probably.
Yeah, I think that's right. Moving on to the payers. California hospitals are suing to block Elevance from putting in place an out-of-network penalty. So basically, Elevance is implementing a policy that would cut payments to hospitals when they refer their members to out-of-network providers. I think you can understand what the logic is there on the Elevance side. And I think as a patient, you know, I can appreciate what the hospitals in California are teaming up to try to, you know, protect, which is, you know, the ability to refer to the best possible clinician on behalf of what the patient needs. So to me, it's like, I understand the incentives on both sides. It'll be interesting to see how this actually plays out. Is this just a negotiating thing and there is no actual trial? I you know, so many of these things are just negotiating tactics in a larger contracting deal. But I think to me, it's pretty clear cut why both sides have the position that they have. You know, for better or worse. I mean, I side with the hospitals here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the other side just for fun. I mean, I think it depends on why. I guess why are they not in network? Right, like so. There's a negotiation about the contract pricing, and Elevance and a health system would decide we're going to put you in these networks, but not these other networks. That's part of the contract negotiation.
Yep.
And so there typically is a different reimbursement rate for out of network. I think what they're upset about is the across the board kind of standard deduction, because that's new. But I think that is part of Elevance's job to design networks and then have a difference between what they reimburse in network and out of network. It's hard for me to see why they're not allowed to do that. But I understand it does cause concern for a provider if they want to refer to a specialty group who's not in network. That's inconvenient, but it also maybe the specialists are trying to get a rate that Elevance thinks they don't need to pay because there are other specialists around. So you could it depends on the facts. Right? Neither one of us know the facts, but you could argue either side. We have this tension in the system, I think pretty intentionally, to try to keep costs low. It's completely failed because costs are not low. But that's sort of what we're seeing manifest here. And California always is the place where these fights sort of bubble up first, I think.
Yes, all good points, Vic. Okay, CVS is continuing the good times rolling for large health insurers. They had a very good earnings report. And as you know, I'm a fan of just kind of skipping to the MLR. I don't care that much about the revenue because that doesn't tell the story. The MLR is really where you find it. And Aetna's MLR, and remember, this is a company that last year this time was imploding. It was like last summer, right? When
last summer, every payer was in trouble.
But CVS, Aetna, CVS, really,
yes, were very bad.
Right. Aetna's medical loss ratio, 84.6%, Vic.
Yeah, which is close to perfect. I mean, they can't really go too far below 85 without having to do refunds or rebates. So that's a pretty ideal number there.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. So I think we now can kind of close out the category and say all of the major payers have fixed their fundamental issues. Let's see what happens next quarter. Generally speaking, I think these MLRs are going to be reasonably durable, and we're kind of out of the low 90s being the baseline. So it's again, we know that this did not happen as a result of real innovation. This was really just financial engineering, maybe stopping being in certain markets, as we just talked last week about Cigna pulling out of the marketplace. But at the end of the day, these companies have a responsibility to their shareholders in order to stay in business, which is they got to get their MLR to a certain place. Whatever you think about that, that's a higher level issue, but getting it into the 84% range is remarkable for where this company was a year ago. So,
yeah, and I think that in general, we want CVS and Aetna to be viable. I mean, they have to be able to run their business, and they're a public company. They need to make some money. A 16% gross margin doesn't seem unrealistic to me. So I think, the ACA set the sort of bar at 85%. I think it's good that they're able to get that.
Yeah. Totally agree. Like, until a better model comes around, we do need these companies to be viable. So, and a really great story, Oscar Health profits hit $679 million. Their membership rises in Q1. So, Oscar is doing very, very well. To me, Oscar is becoming kind of the signal for the growth of ICHRA. I don't want to say they're synonymous with it, but it's definitely the kind of packaged version of ICHRA that has the most scale out there in the market from a dedicated perspective. And to see them growing is I think it's good. I've been talking to people who are experts in the market who have been saying, it may be good for the employers because they're sort of washing their hands of all the hard work, but it puts way too much responsibility and pressure on the household to kind of pull together a package that's all for them. And so this may give rise to other solutions, and it may just kind of create a new, a new industry segment, if you will, as more and more employers move from defined benefit to defined contribution. But I mean, Oscar clearly showing that this market is growing and becoming more and more viable.
Yeah, that's right. Whether it is good for employees and their financial health or not, I think is immaterial. ICHRA is going to grow very quickly. We're moving to defined contribution over the next several years. That will cause some problems, just like it caused some problems in people's retirement plans now that we're on 401ks. But I also think it's not sustainable to not make that move. So I expect it to continue. And Oscar's done a great job sort of pivoting and orienting themselves to take advantage of that, which is really good.
Yeah, and also like let's just take this as an opportunity to say what the reality of the role that employers are going to play in the market is going to be. Everyone keeps saying when the employers actually start putting their foot down, they're not. It's not their job. They're not in the healthcare business. They're in whatever business they're in, and they happen to have employees, and they happen to have to provide some level of contribution towards their healthcare. I think what's going to happen is they're just more and more going to move to ICHRA, right? It's not going to. We're not going to get this employer activist class. It's just, there's no proof of it. There's no proof of it. You don't see them putting, significant pressure and stress on the brokers. You don't see that. It's, even though year over year, the costs are going up tremendously and really impacting P&L. So I think this is where we're likely to see the innovation come from.
Yeah. And employers in general, I think, have a really difficult path if they don't go with ICHRA, because they have a diverse population. If they're a bigger employer, they have a pretty diverse population. Some of the employees have chronic disease, or they need a lot of healthcare during the year, and it's pretty predictable they're going to need healthcare. And others are young and don't consider healthcare as part of what they care about in their job. And so I think part of the benefit of going to ICHRA, as you say, it's X amount of dollars, and each employee can think about themselves and their family and design the plan that's right for them. That does two things that I think leadership loves. One, it fixes the the cost escalation at a rate that they set, whatever that rate is, X amount of dollars. And two, it allows them to sort of wash their hands of the decision making. Like, we're giving you this. It now is very clear the amount of money we're spending on your health benefits, because that's another thing. People don't understand how expensive it is. And then people make decisions they make. And it's not the leadership's decision where they're cutting some benefits and certain groups are mad, and or they spend more and they don't give pay raises, so another group's mad. It just allows them, I think it's a really low friction kind of pathway that most CFOs are going to go for.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, let's move into the provider segment. So UPMC is going to acquire CommonSpirit's Trinity Health. Such an interesting story. So on one hand, we have CommonSpirit that has, by all measures, really kind of turned around what was a dire situation. They were in the $2 billion in annual loss territory before. They now are, I think they're turning, a handsome profit down to the bottom line through a lot of restructuring. Trinity Health is a pretty big brand inside of the CommonSpirit network. On the other hand, we have UPMC that has struggled quite a bit recently, and UPMC acquiring Trinity Health, I think probably is CommonSpirit continuing to fine tune their moves to maximize the kind of network they want to operate. And UPMC probably picking up a decent asset, that's going to give them more scale and is going to help them offset some of the challenges they've been experiencing at the P&L level. So this seems like probably a really good win-win as we continue to sort of work through some of the challenges on the health system side.
Yeah, I agree completely. To me, this is the biggest story of the week. I was surprised. I didn't know UPMC was looking at expanding like this. Trinity is a big platform for UPMC to buy. I don't know the relative size, but it's a significant growth move for them. And I think it's good for both sides. I mean, the Ohio, kind of middle America, Ohio market is reasonably contiguous to UPMC's current market, but I think it might be a touch less competitive. And then for CommonSpirit, they get to focus more. So I think it's a pretty good deal. I was surprised about it, but I think it now that I see it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, completely agree. And your point out of the contiguous nature, it's like it sort of rhymes with the merger Advocate Health, where you had the North Carolina sort of corridor, and then you had the Advocate Aurora piece that was over in Chicago. It's like it's not very competitive, but when you step back and you look at the map, it starts to kind of create that super regional makeup. And
I think it's easier to get approved. I mean, they're not, it's not creating more density and less competition in any market. I mean, CommonSpirit used to run these platforms, and now UPMC is going to. For the patient, I think it would be slightly positive to neutral, really.
Agree. Ardent Health touts outpatient growth and checked labor spend during a hectic Q1. That's from Fierce Healthcare. So our friends over at Ardent, led by CEO Marty Bonick, had a great quarter. And I think maybe one of the best stats here in this article is that net income was $40 million or 28 cents per share, beating the consensus estimate of 18 cents per share. So that's almost with 70%, beat on the cents per share for net income. That's really, really solid. Marty highlighted the disproportionate volume of clinics within their footprint as something that helped them out there. And so, I'm happy for them, because when Ardent went public, they went public at a pretty tough time where they were not getting rewarded very much for strong results. And it's nice to sort of see them have this kind of a beat on the estimates.
I agree. And they had some decrease in volume. So they had a decline in admissions due to weather and some other things.
Yep.
And yet they still were able to grow earnings and grow. And so I think it's a really good operating leadership team over there. They're doing a good job.
Yep. Agree. Hinge Health, which has really been, I think we got to give it to Hinge Health. They have turned out to be one of the best companies in digital health of the last 5-6 years. They are lifting their 2026 outlook after a strong Q1 as it expands to new conditions. Their partnerships, I think particularly the one with Amazon, have just been, fantastic for them. And they went public about a year ago, and first quarter revenue, $182 million, up 47% year over year. I don't know that you can ask much more from a digital health company than that. So they're one to celebrate and one to watch, and hopefully, setting a pace for the rest of the private market on the digital health side, that we can launch companies that can grow post IPO.
Yeah, I agree. They've done an incredible job and really continue to knock it out of the park. So, yes, I need to buy some of this stock. I don't have it.
Not investment advice. Okay, moving to pharma.
Yes, right.
Pfizer Pos better than expected revenue profit. I think this is like the first good headline I've seen about Pfizer, maybe since we recorded Health Further.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, they've really been struggling since their vaccine in the pandemic. That's the last time when they really did well.
Yeah.
So it's good to see them maybe getting back, on stable ground. We'll see how I don't know about their product roadmap, but this quarter they did well. So we got to give them credit for it.
Yeah, first quarter revenue grew 5% to $14.45 billion, exceeding Wall Street's expectation of $13.84 billion. So again, beating the estimates is a very good thing. Maybe they had set expectations so low that which can be a good thing, right? Like, if you start to sort of not expect much and a company is high quality, but really just had some negative headwinds, once they start turning it around, it can be a really good thing. And it's not like Pfizer's going away. You know what I mean? I don't believe that. I think they had to restock their shelves. They had to get much more focused on oncology and much less focused on vaccines. Because that hangover, not just in demand, but also brand is just not great. And so, yeah, I'm happy for them that they are starting to turn things around. This is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking last week that we need more diversity in those big kind of biotech pharma brands. And so Pfizer getting stronger and being a potential kind of acquirer is good for everyone.
Agree. Novo Nordisk shares jump on strong demand for the Wegovy pill. So again, like a good headline for a company that hasn't had that many good headlines, because their primary competitor is Eli Lilly, and Eli Lilly has been really, really strong for a long time. But this article, this article kind of frames up what I've always wondered about them. Right? There's this chart. This is a Wall Street Journal article, and there's this chart in here about the drug availability. And the chart lays bare what we all have known, which is Novo was the leader, right? Ozempic, that name, which was kind of initially the Google for GLP-1s, that is the Novo Nordisk product name, right? That was followed with Wegovy, which is also in the Novo Nordisk portfolio. Then came Mounjaro and Zepbound, in 2022 and 2023 from Eli Lilly. Ozempic and Wegovy, they had, if you're talking about Ozempic, they had like a 6-year head start on Lilly.
Right.
In terms of like availability. So it just really makes you wonder, like, how did they get walloped the way that they did, right? And I think there's a whole analysis to be done there about how that happened. But now, that they also led with the Wegovy pill. They were first out with that. Now they've got Wegovy HD, this high dose version. They have the best portfolio in terms of like variety for GLP-1s on the market. So it's like there's something about the go to market that was deeply flawed versus the way that Lilly decided to go to market. It has to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the world changed after COVID in a lot of ways. And Novo, they just have been slow to come around. They've had some leadership changes, compared to Lilly, who has been really kind of leaning in and almost like anticipating where the market's going to go. But I agree. I mean, having a week where Pfizer and Novo both have really positive stories back to back, we haven't had that in the last 3 years of the show. We never had that.
Never had that. Great. Not one episode have we ever had that. So yes, it's a good thing. And here's another company I can't say that's had like the best headlines, but Bayer is going to buy an eye drug developer, Perfuse Therapeutics, for up to $2.45 billion. The fine print is that they're going to pay $300 million up front, and the rest is going to be subject to hitting development, regulatory, and commercial targets. And so, there's a big gap between $300 million and $2.45 billion. But here's Bayer looking to do a deal and to tighten up their eye portfolio.
And later in the story, it talks about they acquired Monsanto in 2018 for $60 billion. And that was a huge deal and has been a distraction, I think, for Bayer with all the roundup, all the different complexity around Monsanto. It's a huge and valuable company, but it's been a distraction, I think, from some of the Bayer kind of science medication thrust. So it's good to see them kind of back in the game.
Yeah. All sorts of Supreme Court headlines around Bayer Monsanto over the last week. So yes, I totally agree with that. Roche shells out up to $1 billion for Path AI in a move to boost artificial intelligence powered diagnostics. This was probably the most interesting of the pharma acquisition stories that you found this week for me. A digital pathology specialist, which is what Path AI is. They're going to pay $750 million upfront, and then additional payments of up to $300 million linked to the milestone achievement. So much better upfront proposition than the one that Bayer is offering. This is an AI company, right? This is, and it's not the typical AI company that we hear about when we talk about drug discovery. This is an actual digital pathology company. So what do you think this says about the direction that pharma is going in terms of how they are thinking about the ways that AI is going to transform their business?
Yeah, I think it's new to me that they would be leaning into diagnostics in this way, and really positive. I mean, I think being able to have a solution that helps diagnose, maybe what kind of cancer is this, or what strain of a particular cancer, or even what's the pathway in a autoimmune disease, they can then pair it with a much more effective therapy that could be really powerful. It seems pretty new. I don't know how easy it'll be to do, but I love that they're working on it.
So it's interesting, a little bit harkening back to a story from last week, and then I think we're gonna wrap up with a bit of an addendum to that story. But I think that part of what we are seeing, and I think Lilly probably best exemplifies this. I think that part of what we are seeing is pharma companies recognizing that in an era of AI, there is an opportunity for them to be a much more engaged player in the actual delivery of healthcare. And there's all sorts of regulatory barriers to that, right? But those regulatory barriers are historic and tied to the sovereign nature of the physician. As AI challenges that, nothing else can really challenge that. But I think AI is in the process of challenging that sovereign position that the physician holds. It kind of opens up the field for how care can be delivered, right? I mean, you can think about a world where you are tracking all your biomarkers yourself, right? And we're going to talk about Google here in a little bit. You're tracking all that stuff. You've got your genome. You're working with a Function Health to get 4 times a year blood work done, whatever. Okay, fine. And AI is somehow in there doing a major percentage of the diagnostic work. And you're pairing that along with genome to drive some personalized outcome for you. And then that personalized outcome gets delivered to you, right? And it's like, that's a lot happening without you walking in a doctor's office, right? Now, that's not today, but I think that when we look at things like Lilly Direct, or we look at something like Roche, doubling down on diagnostics with an AI-based company, if you squint, you can kind of see a world where pharma and lab companies play a different role than they have before, right? Not entirely being subservient to the sovereign physician, but maybe more serving an empowered consumer. So anyway, that's what I feel like I'm seeing. And again, this is like a 10, 15 year trend line that will have to roll out. It's not going to happen in 2026 or 2027, but it does feel like if you follow the trend, that's part of what may be rolling out in front of our eyes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the prevention of sort of the doctor, not pay, but trips paid for, and lunch and donuts and all of those tactics that were going on in the 90s, even early 2000s before it got stopped. That was the old way to try to influence the doctor to in his or her sovereign castle, would they prescribe these medicines? And you're trying to influence them, basically. And that got significant regulation. Not that they don't do it at all, but there's a lot more rules around that. And then simultaneously, the TV ads started going crazy, trying to go direct to patients to get them to go in and ask their doctor for something. That didn't really work very well, but it was all they had, kind of. And I think AI combined with telehealth really opens up something like Lilly Direct or Roche going direct. You still need a doctor most times to prescribe the medication, but that doctor does not have to be your long-standing internist that you see every year. You can spin up a telehealth visit and go through the process, and hopefully they do a good job sort of advising the patient, but then they are able to prescribe very quickly the drug directly without, it's not, I guess there is a doctor in the process, but it's a doctor that's kind of brought to the table in partnership with the pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, and that's mainstream reality today. That's Hims and Hers and Roe, and I mean that's literally happening every day at scale today. So nothing that you just said is somehow the future, and I'm glad you brought in that component of it, right? Because I think you're exactly right. When you combine a forward-thinking pharma company with artificial intelligence, with a proper regulatory clinical gateway, but not the traditional one, just one that's viable and passes all the sniff tests, it's a pretty different model for delivering care. And I think as drugs become more and more wonder drugs, right? As GLP-1s and some of these other peptides that people are talking about going online next year, as some of these wonder drugs kind of go online, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we are seeing the framework for what a whole new industry could look like.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think it is empowering the pharma companies somewhat, but it's also empowering the patients. I mean, like, they have a lot more choice. They have a lot of access to AI and able to understand their own health better, and that's a good thing. And so physicians might be frustrated about it, but I think empowering the patient, educating the patient, giving them more choice at the end of the day is positive. Now, it'll cause changes like Roche and Lilly being more directly competitive with HCA or Elevance, but that's probably good overall.
Agree. All right. The Health in Us story for the week. I don't think it can be anything else besides the Hantavirus. We're all still like shell-shocked under the trauma of the pandemic. It's hard to even see these headlines, but we must face them. So here's the New York Times story. The headline is Global Health Officials Race to Track Hantavirus but Predict Limited Outbreak. So obviously the predicting of a limited outbreak is a very good thing to hear. Actually, one of the portfolio companies in Nova's second fund, their epidemiologists vibe coded this tracker, which was super cool. I'll send you a link to it. But, yeah, it's super cool. But yeah, I mean, look, Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove from the World Health Organization, she is their head of epidemic and pandemic preparedness, said that this is not COVID, this is not influenza, this spreads very, very differently. And I hope to God that she is right about this. What's your take? I mean, we were together in 2020 at JP Morgan. And I remember we were sitting down having dinner, and you were telling me that someone who is close to the Jumpstart family, very trusted clinician, was telling you that, hey, this thing could have some serious legs, and I think even then when we were having that discussion, we had no idea what was ahead for us. Yeah. So, given that, here we are with this storyline. What's your read?
My read is that it sounds like it is very uncommon for this virus to move from one human to another, although it has happened at least once in this current outbreak. And so the World Health official is saying that it will not be a pandemic or an epidemic because it doesn't spread in the same way that COVID or other very infectious diseases spread. I hope that's right. And, a mutation or two in the wrong direction could make it very different. But right now, it seems like part of the reason I wanted to cover it is just to be honest about it. Like, it was really bad to be on that cruise ship. and it is an outbreak, but it seems like it is contained and not mutating in a way that would be a really kind of global crisis. Although I agree, I have scar tissue and trauma. Everyone does from COVID. So this coming out is not what I want to see. I think it is going to be contained, hopefully.
All right, fingers crossed on that. We'll definitely track it as it continues to roll out. And Web3 this week, I think the big story accurately captured here, AWS taps Coinbase and Stripe to power USDC payments for AI agents. So a couple things about this. One, this has happened very, very quickly. We've gone from theorizing that AI agents would want to use crypto because they don't have to go through a bank to set up an account, to now it's like on the largest cloud platform in the world, partnering with the two big players when it comes to stable coins, being Coinbase and Stripe. Here we are, man. We're in the agentic era where agents will be able to work with each other or accept payments via dollar-denominated cryptocurrency in order to do work. So it's hard to wrap my head around what this means, and I worry about you, listener, being able to fully understand what this means. But along with this story this week, there was also a story about agents being able to now have their own phone numbers. We're just moving to this place where the reality of AI-only companies is becoming more and more legitimate. I think that's the only way to kind of put it.
So my chief of staff has a phone number. Walter has a phone number. It's coming. And it's coming. I mean, I have been watching AI and crypto with you for a long time. And it's really surprising to me how fast it's coming. So there's no question that it is moving very quickly. AWS Bedrock is a huge platform. And so for them to move this, Stripe came out with their payment system like a week ago.
It was last week.
Right.
Yeah, it was last week. Yeah,
so, and then, I think we're going to have, I was looking at GitHub with a different guy last night. They're now having outages because there's so many agents and humans committing code that, didn't used to commit code, and they cannot handle the volume. It's like a 50x increase in like the number of repos on GitHub. So much so that they're having outages. And very quickly, agents are going to be paying each other. And I think it's going to be micropayments, but I think there'll be a lot of agents doing a lot of micropayments in a whole economy that's hard for me to get my head around. And for our listeners, it's definitely hard to get your head around. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, but I think the point is these are all serious names. The last wave of seriousness that we tried to inform you about was when all the big banks were all starting to, use crypto as legitimate collateral. I think Vic, like Franklin Templeton, like now has a crypto department. Right. You know what I mean? It's like the stodgiest Schwab, right. Like the stodgiest names in finance now have a full crypto arm. And now here we are with the biggest cloud platforms enabling AI agents to pay each other. Look, I just think it's what to say, right? What to say? Like it's not science fiction. It's real.
It's here.
It's here. It's here. AI rundown time. Hims and Hers debuts its first AI care agent to interpret biomarker lab results. I don't think I even knew that Hims was doing labs. I didn't know that. So this article actually
I didn't know that either. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So back to our last discussion, but now they have an AI care agent that's interpreting those lab results, right? So again, whether we like it or not, AI doing the equivalent of diagnostic evaluation it's not coming, it's here. It's here. So maybe now we'll just start talking about all the issues that come up from it. But I think nothing stops this train. We're just going to see more and more and more of this, and there's not really a point in debating it because it's out of the box now.
Yeah, that's right. And Hims and Hers is the best, I think. But there's a whole group. I think Hinge is moving in this direction that are nationwide brands, and they are working with patients on more and more subspecialties across the entire country. And for health systems and provider groups, they're not used to that kind of competition. Typically, if you're here in Nashville, there's 3 or 4 hospitals that sort of compete and have most of the doctors. But you don't necessarily think about a nationwide player with the branding and marketing strength that Hims has.
Yep.
And that's a very different kind of competitive landscape that we need to figure out as an industry.
Yeah, completely agree. I feel like when we do these shows, every once in a while from the beginning to the end of the show, like I start to put pieces together and I'm thinking completely differently after the show. And I think this show is one of those shows for me. Google today, big announcements all around. Google really like taking over the Fitbit brand and slapping Google directly on the Fitbit brand as the primary brand for consumer healthcare. This is, it's interesting, right? Like I didn't think very highly of the Fitbit brand, I have to tell you. And now immediately I'm taking this much more seriously, right? I'm like, oh, okay. Like I need to look into this,
Yeah.
And look, I mean, I think Google has a real opportunity here because Apple had a lead with the Apple Health app, but they've just been slow to advance it, and I think we know Google will not be as slow. And certainly Google is much stronger in AI, and Google is integrating Gemini into this app. And so really, really interesting development here from Google on the consumer health play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, I had forgotten about Fitbit and didn't think much about it at all. And you're right. Google, they have a lot of weight in the market and they're really good at delivering products. I think there is a space for how they're positioning this, which is I want to track my health. I want to understand my kind of biometrics and how many steps I'm taking in, my blood oxygen level and all the different readings. But I don't want to wear a watch or a bigger thing. And so it's a really slim kind of form factor. But then they have the Gemini AI so there's no screen, but it still is interacting with you. That's a pretty interesting combination.
Yeah, their new device is called the Fitbit Air, and it's basically Whoop, okay? It's basically Whoop. I think my view of this is that the Whoop brand is really strong, is really, really strong. The Google brand is strong, but I struggle to see how much this really eats away from the brand that Whoop has built. And I think that where Whoop probably edges Google is certainly not on AI, but is probably on trust, because Whoop is built for purpose, right? Like this is all they do. Whereas anytime you think about Google, you think about data, you think about ads, you think about, do I really want Google to have access to this data of mine, right? That's always sort of the drawback with them.
Yeah.
It's never the quality of the engineering. It's always like, do I want them to have access to this data? And Whoop, I just don't think has the same kind of issue, right? And so I think this is really smart from Google. I'm very interested in getting the app, looking at it, seeing how it performs. And at the same time, I think Whoop is in good shape. I don't see this as like a major, major threat to Whoop's future.
Yeah, I think it's going to expand the market. I don't think it will hurt Whoop. I mean, maybe they'll take a few Whoop customers, but Whoop has a very passionate customer base that is going to die with the Whoop on. So I don't see that really changing, but I agree with you. I think it's going to be a serious player in this sort of health tracking space, but I think it will more expand the market and Whoop will be fine. But I think Google will sell a lot of Fitbit Airs too.
All right. Probably the head scratcher of the day, but also like the strange bedfellows, the enemy of my enemy is my friend storyline of the show. Anthropic inks a deal to use all of SpaceX's Colossus 1 compute capacity. SpaceX will supply 300 megawatts of new computing capacity by the end of the month. Now, let's try to map this out here. Colossus 1 is the data center in Memphis that is heralded for how fast it was stood up, how powerful it is, and was used to build all recent versions of Grok. Grok has, by Elon's own admission, falling behind specifically in the coding agent realm, has fallen behind Anthropic. Elon has been very vocal on X about Anthropic. In a way, I think that's parallel thinking to David Sachs, basically saying that, Dario Amodei has been fear mongering and using that as a marketing tactic, and that Anthropic is not a trustworthy company. There was a while there where he was also sort of saying, because Anthropic is not a hyperscaler and doesn't have a Colossus of their own, that they are doomed to fail. But in recent months, two things have happened. One, we have seen Elon admit that Anthropic has been shooting the lights out as a product company, and particularly in their coding models. And the other thing is that Elon has his sights set on destroying OpenAI. And so when you put those two things together, and maybe the third thing is that SpaceX is preparing for an IPO, and it's important to start showing that SpaceX is going to be, an absolute monster when it comes to revenue. And you put all those things together, and here we have Anthropic solving their compute issue, which has been a big issue for them lately, partnering with SpaceX. So not at all the storyline that I expected to hear, but I think when we look at the tea leaves, it does make sense.
I don't think Grok has a significant user base that's driving a lot of usage at Colossus One now. Elon has promised a new version later. He did buy an option on Cursor, which was interesting. So I don't think Elon is out of the AI game. We haven't covered it because I'm tired of it. It's too much like, like paparazzi stuff. But the trial's going on right now where OpenAI and Elon are sort of battling it out. And I think you're right. It's helpful for SpaceX to fill the capacity that no one's using. It's really helpful for Anthropic. I'm sure they're paying a lot for it, but they need the compute. And it's going to hurt OpenAI in a way that will be beneficial to Anthropic and Elon. So I think that I agree with you. It all makes sense.
Yeah. And because this deal has now been struck and Anthropic can say to the market, we have addressed our compute issues, he is now saying that Anthropic could grow by 80 times this year.
Given where they are in revenue already, that's just an incredible number. It's hard for me to get my head around that number, but there's no question that they have been intentionally slowing growth because they can't service the customers they have right now. And so I think compute has been their constraint when they just got a whole bunch more compute. So whether it's 80 times or 50 times, they're growing incredibly fast.
On the OpenAI side of things, you found another white paper. They're now starting to really ramp up their think tank around policy frameworks. And here is one for the U.S. healthcare industry. It's a blueprint for AI in U.S. healthcare called Keeping Patients First. So we're going to put the link in the show notes. There's a lot here to digest. It's 9 pages. But Vic, what's your general TLDR on this?
Yeah, so the main points, and I think I agree with it largely, 60%, in OpenAI's accounting, but I think they're probably roughly right. 60% of their users have been asking about healthcare in the last 3 months. And so that's a huge number, even more than I heard 40% maybe 6 or 7 months ago. So healthcare is on the top of people's mind. It makes sense, but it's still a huge percentage. And then they really leaned into clinician oversight is required, which I think is great because we need our clinicians. And yes, I want my clinicians to use AI, but I don't know that I want to be getting healthcare without a clinician in the loop. Even though I'm a fan of AI, I think a clinician with an AI set of tools is who I want to work with. And so that seemed pretty good. I don't know that it's going to have much of an impact on actual policy, but to the extent that people follow OpenAI, I think it seems like a pretty good framework.
I think I was with you up until that last point. It does seem OpenAI has decidedly made some moves recently that have aligned them with the Trump administration. And I wonder whether or not that's accurate, that they will not be able to influence policy. I wonder about that. I was just skimming through the white paper here while you were, giving your review of it. And it really is pretty clear that it's very thoughtfully aligned with the Maha model, but at the same time is gently nudging and encouraging more AI adoption by the industry, right? It's kind of both of those things. And I think you don't have to do that much to make a huge impact from a policy perspective, right? It's really small things that I think will occur at the agency level, which doesn't have to work through the legislature. And so that means it's really about how tight is Sam with RFK Jr. You know, I think that's the real question here, you know, and I don't know the answer to that, but we do know that OpenAI, you know, on the same day that Anthropic and Hegseth went to war, OpenAI announced a deal with the Pentagon, right? So I think we gotta watch them. They've been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, but for those who are actually following the product has been doing pretty well over the last month, right? I mean, I was listening to AI and I, the podcast from the Every guys, and Every has moved to Codex from Claude Code. You know,
yeah,
and that's like, to me, that's a major bellwether, because I truly trust I trust the Every team to real world test all these models and say at any given point in time, with no allegiance to any lab, which is the one to use. And if they've switched to Codex, that says a lot to me. And it's not just about the model, it's about the harness.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know,
right?
I'm using Codex.
I know.
And Codex is badass. It's really good. I haven't switched everything because I had so much context and MCP servers and a bunch of things in Claude Code that there are certain projects that it's easier for me to do there because I have a bunch of stuff already kind of scaffolded. But every new project right now I'm doing with Codex, it's more permissive. You can do more with it. And I'm at a point in my learning journey where I wasn't 6 months ago, where I don't need Claude sort of keeping me boxed in as much as it does. And Codex is not like that at all. It's like full out. Now it's a little bit, it needs to be reined in. It's almost the opposite. Like with Claude Code, I'm trying to push it and frustrated that it's holding me back. And with Codex, it's the exact opposite. Like Codex wants to run twice. It has, I'm going to say broken out. I don't mean that in an aggressive way. It has moved out of the sandbox that I set up for it. and it does, it's not trying to hide itself. So
it's
like,
opinionated. It's opinionated.
Yeah. So it just uses files in other parts of the computer because it happens to decide to do that now. But it tells me that, and then I'm then scolding it and saying you have very clear instructions. You cannot go outside this directory. It's happened twice, and then another time I always have this adversarial code review process, and so I had it do the review, and it literally said, I did the review, but since I wrote this ticket, I think that some of the mistakes can be glossed over, and we should just it said it to me. And so it is it's all gas, no brakes. And as long as you're careful with it, I think it is maybe a net better, but it's not the first one to use. It's definitely a more advanced, but it's also more powerful.
Yeah, I think we're not going to standardize Jumpstart on that after that review.
No, we're not.
I think we're going to stick with Claude for the org.
And enterprise in general, I think, will standardize on Claude because it will go more slowly, which is good in the enterprise.
Okay, final story. And I want to thank Dr. Cameron Matthews, friend of the family, friend of the pod, one-time guest host who we should absolutely get to guest host again, who listens and texts me whenever she hears something and she doesn't like it. So she texted about last week us covering the headline that made its way across social and the related study in Science around AI beating ER doctors. I will say that before I get into this Substack that she pointed us to, that her response made me say, you know what I really want to do, Vic? At some point, I want to get her and TK on a pod together, because I want to just hear two clinicians that I consider to both be quite innovative and respect. I want to hear them talk it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that maybe as an open ask to both of them. I hope they end up listening to this episode. It would be great to schedule, a conversation between the two of them. They're both very, very thoughtful, innovative clinicians who I think could help both us and our listeners, better think through this topic. But having said that, she pointed us to a Substack called You Can Know Things. The author is Dr. Kristen Pantagani. And basically, she effectively fact checks the headline around did AI beat the ER doctors? And for a variety of different reasons, kind of shows that the headlines were doing what headlines do these days, right? Which is taking something that's going to drive a lot of clicks and driving a lot of clicks. And she here in this Substack shows NPR, Harvard, The Guardian. I can't remember exactly which story we pulled, but I don't think it was any of those.
NPR.
So I think
we did NPR.
We did NPR. Okay, great. Yeah. So anyway, the story made the rounds, and I think the big thing that she highlighted. Well, there were two things. One, they didn't test actual ER doctors, and it was a very small group of doctors that they did test. And then she also focused on an ER doc versus internal medicine doc, and how they have different skill sets and they have different jobs. And it was a little bit poetic license to say that AI was beating the ER doc when it wasn't actually the ER doc. So anyway, it was helpful enough, and we talked to the industry enough that it was worth highlighting that there was a rebuttal to what I would agree is a very sensational headline. It got my attention. And at the same time, I think, Vic, you and I agree that our experience in, let's just say, non-clinical, areas of life, for me, I'll say coding, right? Because that's me talking about my background where I sort of created value early on in my career. I remember the moment when I first started using Claude Code, and I was like, this thing is, I don't even know, it's like 100x better than I ever was as a coder, ever. And does that mean it doesn't make mistakes? No, every single AI thing makes mistakes, like a lot. You know what I mean? Like a lot. But those mistakes tend to be because they're optimized for efficient token usage in the delivery of viable deliverables. They fill in blind spots of context with nonsense. You know what I mean? They do make it's like in the beginning we would say, oh, they're hallucinating, they're just lying. And now I think the more nuanced observation for heavy users of AI is it's not as much that, it's more the prediction engine is optimized to deliver you something. And instead of saying, hey, I have a blind spot here, can you fill in the context? It just fills in the context with its best predictive guess. That's where the issues come in. And I think the more fine-tuned a model is in terms of the context, the less likely it is going to be to have those hallucinations, right? And that's what hopefully the open evidences of the world are proving out, and other specific models. So I don't know. I say all that to say that I'm appreciative that we had this fact check brought up to us, because we need to share all sides of the story, and we need to try to be as accurate as we can about where this stuff is all headed. And at the same time, the trend does appear to continue to point us in this direction, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, two comments. I think it's right that we circle back and be very clear about this rebuttal. I think that's what our job is to do. And we also showed and then published to the listeners the science. I mean, it got published in Science. So to me, that was the signal that made it a story worth covering, because I still respect Science as a academic publication that does good science. But certainly some of the headlines were misleading. I might have characterized it in a misleading way. And I would also say that the biggest trap that I have seen that I'm trying to stay out of is letting my identity as a venture capitalist or as, I don't know, just a human that thinks I have some skills, to think that I'm going to be better than the AI forever, because the AI is improving in its capabilities at an exponential rate, and I'm not improving at exponential. And so even though I've been doing venture capital for 25 years and I think I'm good at it, there are already places where I'm using AI and it is very competitive with me or better than me in certain things. And I think it is a trap to read at one point in time and then make the assumption that you will be good in whatever domain you are focused on and always be a step ahead of AI because it's coming very quickly. So whether the AI can beat ER docs today or not is less of the point. And I think the gap is getting much, much closer. And we just all need to think about, like, what is our role if we are sort of using AI to empower ourselves and do venture capital more. I'm going to stay away from the clinician side because I don't do clinical medicine. But I think that's really the lesson, is to try to not fall into that trap of my identity is I'm this kind of professional, and instead try to think about how can I leverage this to be better at that. And there's going to be aspects of being a venture capitalist that I shouldn't do anymore because AI is better at it.
Yes, agree. I'm starting to get much more comfortable, Vic, and I'm glad you brought up the venture capital bit because, there's been some releases here lately from not just one lab where these model companies are really focused in on the financial services industry, right? And I mean, I ran an analysis on a company that I'm looking at making an investment in, and Vic, look, the output, it was better than any output I'd ever done myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I'm not afraid to admit that because everyone is experiencing that right now. We're all experiencing that. However, I think what I'm getting more and more confident in and more grounded in is all of the context that comes with the physical world, that it's like, it's not just intelligence in the sense of IQ. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the entirety of the value chain. And I think that prior to AI, we put a lot of emphasis on that aspect of it, and now that AI is starting to kind of run away with it, right? With that aspect of it, what I'm noticing is that it's highlighting all the other things that we did not respect enough,
Yeah.
because maybe we overemphasize the importance of intelligence, right? And I'm starting to get really excited about that. I'm starting to get really excited about just all the nuance and the context that happens in the real world that we will have to feed the AI in order for it to be as good as it can possibly be. So yeah, I don't know if I've got better words than that, but I think your point about the identity piece, I think get more to the essence of what the value is that I bring to things. And I don't know that I can articulate it very well, but I'm getting very comfortable with the idea that it's not pure IQ based intelligence.
Yeah, no question. So if you don't have to spend 60 days doing the research and writing the investment memo and getting it all worked on, maybe you can spend that time kind of really working with the team and helping them understand the culture dynamics and how are they going to communicate with each other and how do they solve problems in a small but under a lot of pressure group environment. There's lots of stuff that are EQ or like team dynamics, human dynamics that you can do if you're freed up from doing some of the other work that makes you a much better venture capitalist. And if your identity is not in I write the best memos, but I help companies, or you have to be reframed in a way that is going to be sustainable as AI gets better. It's getting 10, 20, 100 times better every year. So no matter how far away we are as far as a lead right now, with the growth trajectory, we're all going to get past eventually.
Agree.
But I don't think that means we won't have value. It just means my IQ is not the main thing anymore. I have to lean on other aspects of what I can do.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So again, thanks to Dr. Matthews for sending this over. And, we wanted to make sure we shared this with the listeners because I think as much as you and I are true believers that this is the trend and there's not much that's going to stop this train and we're kind of moving in this direction, I think at the very same time, giving an accurate readout on what's happening is also really, really important, right? Because we need to just be grounded in where reality is today. Now the reason we do the show every week is because it's moving so fast. You can't assume that today is going to be where it is in 3 months. That's not reality, right? But where it is today, we should know where it is today, to the best of our ability.
And I'm excited that our listener sent us feedback in. I wish more would. We're going to get some things wrong. And it would be great to hear from listeners. And then when we're wrong, we'll come back and correct it. I mean, I think that's what we need to do. There's enough stories every week that there's going to be times when we're framing it slightly wrong, and we should take account for that and tell people.
Yep. Are you in the office next week? I'm back in Nashville next week.
Yeah, I'm in the office.
Nice. In studio. Okay.
Yeah.
Love it.
As long as we have power. Hopefully by then we'll have power.
All right, Micah, get on it, buddy. All right, man. Great show. And I will see you next week.